Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hearth. Kate, Eileen, and I are pleased to really welcome Anna Chitty with us here today. Anna, who lives out in Boulder, Colorado, and who teaches a multitude of different classes from polarity to biodynamic craniosacral therapy and blueprint resonance, which is going on right now. And we're really happy to have you here with us, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'd like to just start with just getting to know you, hear more about how you started along this path of work. And I don't know if you are open to sharing anything about that.
Yeah, I graduated college in 1972, and I didn't want any more of that. So I came to Colorado actually, and excuse me, John Chitty, my husband, I met in college, and we came out west, lived in Colorado, got married here. We had a giant wedding in the mountains in way up high in the middle of nowhere, and jeeped my grandparents and his grandparent into the wedding on a jeep because they couldn't get there. And we had 150 friends from college actually who flew and drove out here, and we had quite a moment there with all of us, and it went on for days, so it was quite the event. And some people actually moved here because of it, and we left very soon afterward. And we went to British Columbia because a friend who had been at the wedding said, "You should come out here. It's great." So we said, "Great." And we packed up and went. And we ended up living on a little island in the middle of nowhere, Hornby Island. It's 12 square miles. It's tiny. And it's 6 miles from the ferry dock all the way around to the other end. And we started a community with 7 other families. So there were 8 of us. And we bought 80 acres on Hornby Island with blackberries, apples, pears, filbert nuts, walk through the forest to the ocean for $1,000 an acre.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, right? $1,000 an acre. And so each of us, it was $10,000 to have a piece of heaven. And so we lived there and we did the back to nature thing, gardened and had animals and all that, and loved it really. But after a while, I thought, I want to do something with people, like not just farming and talking about 2x4s and broccoli and how it's doing and where the next load of fertilizer was coming onto the beach, that we could drive our truck onto the beach and scoop up all the seaweed and take it home and dump it on the gardens, and everything would go, oof, And we loved it, but I was craving something more with people. I made stained glass for a living, and stained glass doors and windows for friends building on the island. And those little things you hang in the window with the pressed flowers, I made those, and that was way back. But I really was longing not to work with hostile materials, glass, lead, fumes, wasn't that great. And so one day I came down to my stained glass table, and there was 2 spiral bound books. One was called Energy, and the other one was called Wireless Anatomy. And I thought, wow, what's this? And at the time, I was recovering from an accident where I had cut my thumb, and I had a major surgery. And I had the experience of seeing everything as energy from my bed, looking out over the meadow in front of us and the mountains beyond the water and on the island. And I saw everything as energy. So I looked at this book, and it was called Energy. It's like, wow. And then this other one, the wireless anatomy, and all these cool charts. And it was all about people, but it was about geometry of the body and the spirit in the body and how the body expresses itself in its involution coming into form and evolution going back out of form. And I just was, wow, I was entranced. So I found this program on Orcas Island and I said, John, let's go to this. It was a weekend, $65 for the weekend. We lived at a very low, because we lived on the island, we didn't make a lot of money. And he said, oh, I don't know. He loved the island. He didn't want to go anywhere. And I don't know, polarity therapy, whatever. So I was going to go. And then just as I was leaving, he said, oh, okay, I'll go because, yeah, it's probably going to be cool and I should go. So he came. And we went to Orcas Island and I felt like I knew everyone already. It was the really unusual feeling to get there and see people like I'd known them for lifetimes. It just was such a homecoming. And he had the same experience. So we just fell in love with polarity therapy. And that weekend, we just kept unraveling all of our patterns and seeing them together and just going, wow, no wonder you're this way and I'm that way. And we have our struggles. It was really cool. So that was the start. That's where we got into polarity therapy. And we went home, we packed up and we moved to Orcas Island and sold our house and first we went for a small training, then we went back, then we came back, moved there, and we started a 9-month program of every day from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. 6 days of the week, training in polarity. And doing all these weird some of these Dr. Stone things that were kind of bizarre. And anyway, all wheatgrass and, hot and cold and, oh God, purifying diets and fasting and all that, along with emotional 2-chair work and body work. Everything's opening up. It was cool. We loved it. And after 9 months, we moved to California as part of that organization and started giving sessions and so forth, being part of the community. So,
how old were you then, Anna?
28. 28. And it was, the happening time. This was like Ann Wigmore was at her best and all the California healing characters, the Bernard Jensen and the colon cleanse and Wigmore and the wheatgrass and the sprouts. So we were all about all of that.
Was the Marietta Hot Springs?
Eventually, first it was Orcas Island, and then we moved to Southern California because we opened up another place in Calistoga. And then that was good. And John and I moved to the Sierras and opened another place in the Sierras.
Wow.
I know. And there I was like, I cooked, I was a waitress, I did polarity sessions, I taught cross-country skiing, I took people for walks, whatever, we all just did whatever. And it was very fun. And then we ended up finding Marietta Hot Springs, which was a 50-acre giant resort in Southern California with 14 tennis courts and mineral baths, mud baths. It had been a world-class resort and it had been neglected or abandoned for 6 years. Mm-hmm. So we just moved in and through people power, we brought it back to life. Mm-hmm. And that was a great thing. And we slowly renovated the buildings and ourselves. Mm-hmm. There were 150 of us. One of the ways we renovated was we'd all move into a room, everybody move into a different room. And then of course we'd fix up the room because it was our room. And then we'd have to move and then we could rent it out, So that's how we did it. Yeah. Anyway,
sounds like a really dynamic time.
Very, yeah. Yeah, I loved it. And it had its distortions too. It had its
Mhm.
problems. So I'm not wanting to skim over that. Yeah.
I've seen pictures that you've shared with us from that time. I think it was that time when you all wore the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we all
That
were.
meant- and all the
Yeah.
two-chair work, did lots of two-chair work.
Lots of that. Yeah, I got rather messianic about the two chair. I was gonna, yeah, we could all figure it out. We could do it with the two chair. And I
Well,
realized,
would
well,
you tell listeners what the two chairs are? Because I think maybe some people might not know.
well, the two chairs originally was from Gestalt, but we sort of adapted it more to polarity, the two sides of the polarity.
Mhm.
And if you could feel the one and you could then feel the other side and go back and forth, pendulate back and forth, the experience of each one would start to bring some kind of balance. Because anything in extreme, especially in fixation, if you can help it move by changing states to something different and then coming back and going back and forth, it begins to open things up. And it can apply really beautifully to relationships, because you've got to sit in the other person's chair and see it from their perspective. Your parents, your kids, your spouse. And it was a really potent way to see that the dynamic we were projecting out was actually a dynamic inside us already. So if we could start to really see that and the origins of that and get some flexibility and movement in some places that were pretty fixated that a lot of times are unconscious, which you all know about from pre and perinatal. So many deep roots that determine the way we see things.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
I'm blabbing away. So I hope this is.
Yes, you're blabbing. You want to hear it, you're blabbing. But so you did that for how many years in California? And then what happened? Like, because in there, I know you met Franklin Sills and then you came to Colorado. So say, keep
How did
going
it
with
all
the
go?
story.
Oh, it's such a wild story. I don't know what to say of it. We were there for 8 years, and yeah, and we live by these ideals, and we were trying to live the polarity life, not just teach it, but live it as a community, which I thought was a very lofty and beautiful intention. So we did. But then we found out that the leadership was not living the ideals and was living some distortions that really were not good.
Mm.
And so there was an earthquake one day, and the ground swelled and everything shook, and the whole community just blew apart. And because everyone that particular day found out all the things that had been happening that we didn't know about that were happening behind the scenes in the leadership. And it was a real crushing moment. And we ended up throwing the leader out, which I thought was a sign of health. We didn't just keep going on. We just went, no, this is no. So a lot of people left, and yeah, and it was a bit of a wild transition there. And after a year, we decided we needed to sell and move. It was too much baggage to try to keep going. And so we had a polarity conference there. I met Ray there, Castellino. He came for a conference. He and Jim File. We met in the hot tub at Marietta Hot Springs, which was the polarity resort. And we began opening up to more things in that year to try to see if it could keep going. And so anyway, I have a picture somewhere of Ray and me and Cindy Rawlinson and Jim File all in the hot tub at Marietta Hot Springs. It was a polarity conference. So I think it was that one maybe or another one. Franklin came. And I think Liz, my daughter, was a baby. She was just a baby. It was 1989, and she had been born in 88. And Franklin was like this amazing breath of fresh air coming into our polarity understanding and our polarity world, because he understood the core from being trained in osteopathy. And he brought to life how osteopathy was like the core of polarity. Dr. Stone was a polarity, he was an osteopath.
I see.
So he's the creator of polarity therapy.
Yeah.
And he was an osteopath, a naturopath, a midwife, a homeopath, I forget what all else, chiropractor. Yeah. And he found a limitation in that view, which was mostly physical. And he traveled the world and he studied the ancient art of healing in all these different traditional settings. And he said, wow. So what he saw was it's an energy field, and the energy moves from pole to pole. And when that's functioning well, there's health. And when we're fixated in one way or another, and that's why the two chairs was cool, because you get a fixated perspective. And when you got to go to the other side, like, oh, okay. And see yourself. So we knew all of that, but we didn't know the core of it, the CSF and the core of it. And so Franklin gave a talk and we all just went, whoa, okay, we want to learn this. This is super cool. And he did also a workshop. And for those of you that know cranial, what he did in the workshop was ringing the ethmoid bell. Now, none of us knew any cranial work or had any cranial skills. It's like thumb on the palate and hands on the bridge of the nose. And that's what we did that was my first learning of cranial.
And did you feel
Yeah. Cool. It was kind of wild. A lot of things were being felt. It was not all of ease, it was a lot. But we said, actually, I had studied Upledger before that, so I did have some ground. So we just said, we want to do this. So I talked to Mary Louise Mueller, who was a friend from the fellowship, and we said, oh, we got to get him to come. So we said, would you come teach us polarity therapy? That's what we wanted. And he said, okay. So I was moving to Colorado at the time. So Mary Louise set it up, and Franklin came, but he said, I don't want to teach polarity. I want to teach cranial. And I thought, oh, I don't want to learn all that anatomy. I'm too old,
What were you, 32? Were you 32 or 20?
No, when I met Franklin, I was 42.
Oh, I see.
Really old. And so I was a little hesitant. I didn't want to learn all that anatomy, but I really wanted to study with Franklin. So we did. We had a big, huge group, and Ray was our assistant. And then after one module for 26 people, we thought one assistant was not quite enough. So Franklin brought Claire Dolby the next time. So we had another person. So yeah. And at that time, I was also studying with Peter Levine. So for me, the combo of the SC and the cranial work was really cool.
What year was that?
Say it again?
What brought you to Peter?
Oh, because we were living in Boulder and we were teaching polarity in Boulder. And one of our students said, oh, God, you got to study with this guy, Peter. He's just come to town. It's just a new thing. And he's really cool. And it's really cool stuff. Trauma. And I thought, oh, okay. All those people that have trauma, which I didn't really grok that one of them was me. But Peter lived here in Lyons, which is just 10 minutes from Boulder. And so we used to go out there and have study groups with him and just hang out. And yeah. And then he did a training in Boulder. And so I did that. And that was the beginning of, I always have my ear out. If there's something somebody says, I go, oh, that sounds good. So studying with Peter was awesome. And then I started the cranial. So I always had the two together. Yeah.
And those
I
are
used to get sessions from Peter too, and that was really cool. You could just go for a session anytime, it was great because it was early days of the whole thing.
yes.
It wasn't SC yet, and it was no Ergos Institute, or there was nothing. It was just Peter.
So was this still in the late 80s then?
This was the early 90s when we had just moved here. Yeah. Yeah.
So then you began to massage everything so that it kind of morphed. But you taught biodynamic cranial and polarity, and then you began to develop what you currently teach.
Well, actually, there's another piece in there. Another piece in there was that Ray was the assistant for the cranial training. So then I thought, well, I want to know what Ray's all about. So that's how I got into PPN in the early 90s. And I invited Ray to come out here. And I said, I can get some people. And so we had 5 womb surrounds. And there was like 9 in each one. I mean, that was when he would do 9, whatever space of time. And I got to know Ray because we liked to roller skate during the breaks in the cranial training with Franklin. Ray had his rollerblades, and I went, oh, I love to rollerblade. So we would go skating all over the hills of Southern California, the nice, smooth new roads, easy, great. And so that's how we got to know each other. And then he came out here and we did one big intro night. And then I think we did 5 room surrounds. I participated in the first one with John and other peers. And then I assisted the other 4 in a row. And about the 4th, the 3rd, somewhere in the end of the 3rd, the beginning of the 4th, I had a complete meltdown. It was and Ray says, well, I was wondering when that was going to happen. But Ray was so gracious about whatever state you were in. And that is one of the things that I just love about Ray. You could bring anything and you go, oh, I totally know. Oh yeah, I go through that all the time. I mean, it's just so welcoming, really, not just a principle, but literally he was one of the most welcoming, especially men that I have known, just whatever state you're in, bring it on and let's be together, So yeah, so that was quite a powerful time. And then I took his next training. So I don't know, it was a long, long time ago. Maybe his second I think maybe his first actual planned out training. So yeah.
Wow.
So that was in there too, just saying. So PPN's been a big part of the whole evolution too, and Ray being a friend all those years as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
you all seem very close. You taught together other things like the body and the being and other cranial forces. Seems you all blended things and learned from each other and were good collaborators with each other.
Yeah. I love that. A good collaborator. I just love that. So he was a great collaborator and we had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm really, as I'm taking in the story, what I often notice as I'm working, that I can feel all these different streams of work. I studied mostly with Myrna and Ray,
Mhm.
and, I can feel how all these different streams of work have touched the work that I learned.
Mhm.
And so what I'm really appreciating in your story is what a rich time of breaking ground you all were in. And then each of you breaking ground in your own work. And then there was so much collaboration and mixing of all your modalities that now I really understand that
Mm.
quality of all these different kinds of work and how they are combined in this one work.
Yeah, and we actually said, Ray and Franklin, it would be good if you could meet Peter and
Mm.
bring more of that understanding. So we set up for Peter to present at the 10th Polarity Conference in Michigan so that we could get him together with Ray and Franklin. So we did. That was a cool thing. And when Peter was speaking at the Polarity Conference, he paused himself at one point and said, "Oh my, I've never really thought about this, but now I'm speaking to a polarity audience." He said, "I was really impacted by Dr. Stone. I forgot early on, I was really impacted by the pendulation, the back and forth. That was a big influence in his work." So it was a nice coming together of all of us in that time. Yeah. And it influenced the work. Yeah. And Franklin's work really influenced Ray big time.
Yes.
That's the whole relational, coming closer, finding the sweet spot. That was very much actually Maura Sills. She had a big influence on Franklin, and she's a beautiful teacher. And she brought the relational field piece to the cranial work, I think, through Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So as you're talking about all these things coming together, one of the things that uh, at least really impacted me when I first met you was the spiritual aspect of it. You're talking a lot about energy and polarity and biodynamic craniosacral therapy, as well as some of the psychotherapeutic, and trauma and all those aspects. But you also have a lot of background in a lot of different spiritual practices. And I know some of that comes through polarity and Dr. Stone and where that all stems from and his original studies. Can you speak a little bit more about some
Mhm.
of the different spiritual influences in your work too?
Yeah, thanks. It's funny, I wrote my thesis in college on Zen art and Surrealist art,
You
like
were an artist.
East and West. I was an art history major.
Mm.
I'm not really an artist, but I was an art history major. And that process of writing that thesis ended up being really this passion of my senior year, starting my junior year. And in the process of seeing what happened to the surrealists and what happened to the Zen practitioner or adept, I don't know what you would call, there was coherence in the Zen realm, and there was total incoherence in the progression of what happened for the surrealist artists who were using substances and different things to alter states. And a lot of their writings had things that sounded like the Zen. And so in writing it, I began to see myself, and I saw that I was heading into the incoherence. And so I began being curious about, well, what would it be to be a real practitioner? And I started to have a real passion about that. And John did too. That was one of our major connections that always held us, that we both were interested in spirituality. And so we tried doing yoga and meditating and all this in our 20s. And and then we found polarity therapy, and Dr. Stone's talking about how the soul comes into form and how we can live in such a way that there's this beautiful cycling of coming into form and then longing back towards source and taking the information from there back into form and the information from form back towards source. It's very much about balance. It wasn't about, just living in the clouds. And this very grounded map of the energy system. So that's what our whole community was about. And we were trying to live these principles. We really were. The whole community was like passionate about living the truth. And we fell by the wayside because we were young and a bit arrogant, and we didn't really have the foundation or the ground. So let's see, when I came to Boulder, I became involved in a Zen community, and I really sat long sessions and a lot of Zen practice for many, many years, 20 years, some. And then somewhere in there, I discovered Diamond Heart, and my brother was into it. And he would talk about it, and I was curious, but I was hesitant. I was like, I don't want another one of those cults, I don't want a weird community thing that's going to turn south. And totally, when the Marietta community died, I was absolutely bereft for years. It was such a heart. I knew there was distortions, but I loved all my friends, and we raised our kids together, and I just was heartbroken, really. And I was not going to get my heart broken again in that way. So I was very reluctant to totally go the Diamond Heart. I was like, Ron, is this a call? What's going on here? So I checked it out for quite a while, but I ended up doing that whole path and becoming a teacher of that, which takes many, many 20 years.
Yeah.
It's a long program. That's a long program.
Well, can you describe it, Anna? Because I don't know, some people might not know the Diamond Heart approach.
Yeah. Well, it's very syntonic. It's very simpatico, maybe, with the Zen approach. And what it does is give you a way to, it teaches you how to begin to be with your experience and not to move away from it, which is very similar to sitting Zen. You sit there for hours on end and you don't get up and you don't move. So you literally, but you can still move away from your experience in your mind. But you just be sitting there, but you might not be in your experience, really. So I found that you'd be over here. Woo! Yeah. But I found the two went well together because I could see where I was leaving my experience and I could study it more. And then I could start to see what was pulling me. And so when I started with the diamond approach, I was, you actually you let yourself be in the pulled away place. You don't necessarily have to bring yourself back. You go feel what is compelling about that. And by staying with it and allowing it and bringing acceptance to it, permission, something would melt and something would open and a whole different thing would show up that was much more here. But it was inclusive of there. It wasn't, So then I discovered there's a whole underlying map of this blueprint, which I just sort of started using that word a lot, blueprint, for the underlying order. Franklin would call it the ordering principle. The potency is the ordering principle in cranial. But I began to call it blueprint because it felt inclusive of emotions and belief systems and projections. And it began to take a larger picture, which polarity had always done, because polarity was about mind, emotions, and body. And when you touch the body, you're touching the emotions and the mind patterns. And when the energy is distorted, there's going to be a mental, emotional, and physical component. So I was always interested in that. And cranial osteopathy doesn't really talk so much about that. And polarity gives you a map, and diamond approach gives you a brilliant map which brings together psychology and essence. And so for me, essence is like, it's the blueprint. We think of the torus as the blueprint, the shape that goes out from center to periphery, periphery to center. Raise Mother Earth, Father Sky, back, front, right, left, is bringing us to the center of the torus, inside, outside, takes us to the center of the torus. And I began to realize Dr. Stone had pictures of it, the energy body and this field and the chakras coming down the center and the core in the center. Franklin taught us about the core. The core relates to the field. And Franklin knew that. And what I sort of started to gain from Diamond Heart was a sense of that the whole field is they're flat pictures in Dr. Stone. And all of a sudden one day I went, oh, it's dimensional. It's three-dimensional. And then somewhere in there, John started finding these pictures of Tauruses. I'm like, oh. And then through Diamond Heart, I realized the blueprint it's not just black and white lines, it's color. The whole thing is an essential body. And that body has color and qualities. And each psychological territory has a corresponding blueprint quality that can untangle it. Because the blueprint in its intelligence meets experiences in life that are less than optimal and shapes itself to meet that. So if we can be with that, with appreciation, starts to wake up the blueprint that's inside, that's been static, holding this, that can begin to unravel it. So the blueprint's in the wider field, but it's also right inside the distortions.
In our bodies.
In the body. And the energy body. Because there's a way.
All these layers, inside and outside.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, and Dr. Jealous, who's an osteopath who passed away a few years ago, brilliant, said that the word soma, which we take to mean somatic body practice, somatic work is body. He says, yes, and soma is a Sanskrit word that means sacred body, perfect body, perfected body that sits right with us. So what I learned is that if we can stay with the distortion and we can sit with it and give it space and give it contact, and we can come in contact more deeply with it, something begins to quiet down. And we start to open sort of to a slightly different dimension, which is where the subtle senses live, which Dr. Vanderwall would say the visible becomes the invisible. The blueprint's in the invisible, but it's governing the visible. Dr. Stone said, energy is the real substance. And I find that statement just amazing. In the 40s.
Yes.
Energy is the real substance? It's invisible. How is it the real substance? And he says, behind the appearance of matter and form. Matter and form is appearing and disappearing, but what's real is energy, which I like to call presence.
Mm.
So
What's real?
what's real is what's invisible. Okay. And the cool thing is we can palpate it. We can feel it. We can sense it. Some people can see it. I'm not one of them. Some people can hear it. Sometimes you can smell it with the subtle senses. I think babies are just living in it.
Yeah. They perceive it much more readily. Yeah.
And they're managing all the weirdness that's around them. And then they slowly get hypnotized into thinking they are the weirdness that's around them. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. What I just said.
You know what? As I'm listening to you, I'm still, I'm kind of backing up to that doorway that you described of acceptance.
Yeah.
You know, as I'm listening to how Diamond Heart gave you that capacity for acceptance, and actually in the limited time that I studied with you, the thing that really landed for me one day is when you talked about radical acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, as you then started to speak with Blueprint, it's almost like that acceptance then gave you access for what was inside to emerge.
Yeah.
And that acceptance kind of gave that open receptivity for, I mean, all of this insight that you just shared to arrive.
Mm-hmm. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for that reflection. Yes. Radical acceptance. Radical inclusivity is actually Shinzen Young's term. Radical inclusivity. Yeah. It opens the portal. And the way I used to think of it is like you have an advent calendar and it has all these little doors. And behind the calendar is the universe, you know, and or presence as universe. And so the imprints are the little doors. And when there's acceptance, appreciation, inclusivity, then you're with one of them and the door opens and you get a little glimpse of this massive cosmos. And then maybe open another door and another one. And at a certain point, you might get a glimpse of like, wow, the whole background.
Can I
And it's
pause?
yeah, sorry. I'm getting
Okay,
wrong.
I'm just enjoying it. Yeah.
Thanks.
The background behind the doors. I would like to know that. What is that?
That's to be discovered through the imprints.
Yeah.
Opening through.
And that's what you teach in the Blueprint Resonance is how to go to the doorway there and with clients and help them and yourself,
And yourself. Yeah.
Understand that blueprint behind the Advent calendar. Yeah.
Well, it's like the glimpses of the presence that you're talking about, the glimpses of I mean, I love the fact that you talk, or you're just saying right now, the energy is presence. And it's like the glimpse of the presence that's there, always there.
Yes.
And I remember, the first time I actually studied with you, one of my biggest learnings was when you spoke about blueprint and imprint and how they're not these two separate things that we so much in our field we talk about the blueprint or the imprint, but that they're one in the same, and how that within the imprint is the blueprint expressing in a certain way. And you just spoke about it a little bit ago too, about how the blueprint is meeting the experience at that time, and it becomes an imprint. I mean, you didn't say this part, but you have before it becomes an imprint because then it gets fixated or stuck in that place, and then that's what we experience as a imprint,
which we think of as a problem. It has to be fixed.
But underneath it or within it is the blueprint, the presence of how to meet what has just occurred.
Yeah. It's almost like the blueprint in its kind wisdom, because kindness is an element of the blueprint. Wisdom is an element of the blueprint. In its kind wisdom, it holds it for us because we couldn't digest it at the time. And it gives us a working adaptation so that we can make it. We can fit in. We can do a life. And on another level, it's this kind holding, but it's fixated. So it's waiting for I think of it like the sleeping beauty in the tower, waiting for us to hack through the briars, all the layers that have accumulated, to find the sleeping beauty, which is us. And we're also the one hacking through the briars, Like we have to be with all of that grit because it's part of what grows us until we finally can meet ourselves. And the blueprint in its kindness has held the sleeping beauty there, waiting for the moment, the kiss of the imprint and the blueprint, which wake up the beauty of who we are, or wake us up to it. We already are it.
Yes.
It's like frozen in the castle.
That's beautiful.
That is very beautiful. Well, imagine somebody out there listening that hasn't experienced all this with you, Anna, that they might be kind of curious, like how do you access the blueprint and the imprint, and what does it look and feel like when you do?
Yeah. Well, I think Eileen started that with the radical acceptance. Can we accept our gnarly parts? Because that's the briars. But, as we go through the gnarly briars, we grow from struggle. It's not about just living in the castle. It's like tangling with our issues and so forth, and appreciating the tangle. It's not something wrong. So often it's like, this is wrong about me and I need to fix it. And I would say, rather than it's wrong, what's wanting to arise? Because that blueprint background, I was going to say one other thing about that background to the Advent calendar. It has a layer way in the back that's absolutely unchangeable. But as it comes closer, there's like qualities that arise. So you might look through and there's a certain quality to what you see. And in another window, you might see a different quality. Mm-hmm. And the qualities are, all part of this whole. So I wanted to say that because as we be with ourselves with radical acceptance, and we begin to really get specific about what is the experience I'm in right now. So I'm irritated. Okay. They think, that's not spiritual. Yes, it is. It's a piece of the grit. It's like, what is it to feel? How do you feel irritated? And how do you give it space enough to meet it and let it be held lightly, gently, so that we can actually feel, it's like sandpaper under my skin. Or it's like thick rubber I don't feel a thing. So you get curious, like, how thick is that rubber? Is it all over your body? Is it on the outside, inside? You get curious. It becomes an adventure. Getting through the brambles is it is the journey. What in Buddhism they say, this body, the Buddha. This body is the Buddha. You have only to discover it. So the Sleeping Beauty is right here, and it's in every distortion. Mm-hmm. So it's helpful to have another person's presence with you, mm-hmm. because these places all have like big signs that say, stay out. Mm-hmm. Don't go here. This is bad. Don't go here. Fix it. Change it,
Numb it out. Don't do it.
Right. So you can feel that and appreciate that. Like that, when we were little, we couldn't go there. We really couldn't. And now we're like the elephant that they, put the stake in the ground, and the elephant can only move around the stake with a string. And then it grows up and it's huge, and they can still put the stake in the ground. The elephant will stay right there, even though it could pull the thing up and walk off. It doesn't. So we become, what's the word? Conditioned or acclimatized to a certain cage, that we've created. So the way in and through is to feel the cage. Is it wiry? Is it because the body literally has these different shapes, and it's just amazing, really. And so as you appreciate it, what did that do for you? How's that been helpful? Oh, it's been protective. Well, yeah, and it's good. It's been really good. And actually, we don't want to get rid of it. It's always there, and it's going to be helpful when we need it, but do we need it all the time? So we get to know it. Now, as we get to know it, we get specific, and with the presence of another who's also curious, not having an agenda for how we need to get rid of that and be this, and not analyzing it, just like, wow, that's so clever. The imprints are clever.
Yeah.
Cool. They're amazing. So we go, wow, that's really cool how I did that. Mm-hmm. And now there's a different me that's with this. That's the beginning of disidentification. I have this structure, but I am not this structure. There's a me that's curious about it and appreciating it. That gives us some space. And when the reactivity quiets down, like, don't go there, oh, I should know, I'm bad, I didn't, judgment, everything we have about these things. Oh, it gets quiet. When it gets quiet, space begins to open. Mm-hmm. And that's the door on the little Advent calendar beginning to open. And suddenly it's not the big, scary, horrible thing we thought it was. Because when we enter it with curiosity and presence, with the presence of another, it begins to reveal something deeper about who we really are. And if we entered through the doorway of irritation, we might find that we're actually really strong in a essential way, and that nothing can take that strength, or that we're actually big and full, but we've had a self-image that we're small and weak. Right? So, and every time there may be a different quality that fills your body, literally fills your body with its purity, pure strength, or pure kindness, or pure compassion, steadfastness. Mm-hmm. And these are the essential qualities that we are. And no one teaches them to us. No one can take them away from us. they can get obscured, so we don't know they're there. And then we create compensations because we think we don't have it. But as they begin to arise, it feels so true and so real. This is the blueprint. And we know. From there, I could tell you all about strength or compassion. And you as a therapist could just sit back and go, thank you for teaching me. You know, it's sort of like, to me, the work is helping someone get to the place where their own wisdom, they go through that door and their own wisdom starts to show up. And then they teach me. Because those qualities are self-knowing. Knowing is inherent in the quality. Like one of the qualities would be clarity. Well, there's knowing in the clarity. And I love that. Nobody can teach it to you because you are it.
Mm-hmm. And the therapist's job is to help that person discover it for themselves.
To help, I like Dr. Still, who was the originator of osteopathy, and he said, life heals itself given the proper conditions. So I like to think that what we do is somehow come into the proper conditions through which a person can find themselves. And that might mean the proper conditions to be there, to support someone, to be with something hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. That they might not be able to be with without us being there. And, you know, to feel the validation there. Yes, what you're feeling is hard. And yes, it is hard. And it was hard. And it was too much when you were little. Mm-hmm. But now you can be there. I know it.
And I'll be there with you.
And I'm not there with you. The presence that's here is there with you.
Nice.
And that presence, your presence can resonate with that. And to me, that's what's really happening. So I'm not really helping you see anything, or I'm just sitting in the presence with you.
And this is what you teach in the Blueprint Resonance course.
Yeah. How-to. It's a very how-to course, wouldn't you say? I mean, you guys are both there.
Yes.
It's a very how-to. It's not just like, it's nuts and bolts. And,
it's a how-to course, but it's steeped in I would say generations of wisdom, or maybe not even generations. It's steeped in the wisdom of so many cultures, so much that's been here over millennia, and how it's informed and emerges through all these different modalities that find a way of how do we start to orient and connect back to that which we already know.
And just one more thing on your question, Kate, about how does it feel, the blueprint? Because I love that, and I feel it's a felt knowing. And I would say when the blueprints are rising, there's a sense of quiet. There's a sense of incredible purposefulness that's really slow, but very deliberate. You have the sense you're in the presence of something that knows. It's what built us, I mean, these bodies are magnificent and completely mysterious. And some intelligence, because they're very precise in their order. Very precise.
True.
And there's a wisdom that's very precise that's happening to form this body. So when we come in contact with the blueprint, which is always way more and way bigger than the imprint. The imprint's small, but we could all focus on them and we think they're huge, but really, so I think of it like every morning the sun rises and we can calculate precisely when it will rise, where, any place on earth. We can calculate that. We know which stars are going to move and what's going to be visible in the sky. We know when the moon is going to be full or when it's going to set, when the tide's going to come in. Precise. So we have to understand that this intelligence, the blueprint is intelligence, formative intelligence, and it's precise. It's, what did Dr. Sutherland say? I think unerring in its potency. It takes a sperm and an egg, and this is amazing.
It's true.
How does that? So when we tune to it, we're tuning to that invisible force that's unfolding the embryo into a giant human. And we're tuning to the force itself. And when I say force, you think of something like, I don't know what you think of, but when I say force, you think whatever you think, I don't know. But it's what's, I look out the window and there's leaves starting to come out of the sticks that look like the bush look like sticks. But now there's something that's starting to come out. Super slow, super organized, very precise. So when you feel the blueprint happening in your body, it feels really reliable, orderly. The universe is orderly. It looks random at one level, but the bigger you look, the more orderly you can see that it is. And the more we align with that order, the more we unfold in a way that feels connected. The blueprint connects everything. So we begin to unfold like a flower ourselves. So the more we align with that, which is our mid-space and the field, and we allow the distortions and appreciate them, the more we start to resonate with that deeper wisdom, which is slow, deliberate, purposeful, reliable, symmetrical. And then when it meets a force, like a lot of wind to a bush, the blueprint of the bush begins to respond in the best way to that wind. So it may look distorted, but it's actually extremely intelligent.
So it sounds like we become better human beings. I mean, more in touch with our true nature. But if someone out there was listening, would they say, well, will it make me a better person to get a good job? Will it make me happy and meet my true love? I mean,
yes, I mean, ultimately you meet your true love and it's you. And then you can love everyone.
That's true.
And then you have a better relationship when you meet someone that you feel is your life partner or your true love or because that's real too,
That is.
But your discerning is much clearer.
Yeah.
And you're not your attachment system gets healed in the process because you become in love with love. With love, it's everywhere.
That's right.
So there may be someone in particular that you really love that you
well,
love
we're coming to the end of our time, and just to complete, like you and John were married for a long time, like 40, 50, how
40, let's see, when he died in 2019, we got married in 1973, so you can do the math. It's 47 years, I think.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
two are still, even though he's no longer here, an amazing sort of, contributors to our healing world through the Colorado School of Energy Studies. And now it's being passed on to your daughter. And you also have an amazing son who lives in Baltimore. But I wanted to make sure we came back around to your life.
Yes, I have a daughter who lives with me with her wonderful husband Hector, and Hector works for the school. Liz, they don't work for it; they own it now. It's their school. I work for them now, and which I like. And they have three beautiful children, and we all live here. And it's a growing edge. It's a growing edge, but I'd say we're doing pretty well at this point. And then I have a son in Baltimore who also has a lovely wife and a son that he's raising. And both families are what do you call it? Bicultural,
Multicultural.
multicultural families, both of them. So that's a beautiful evolution too from the white Scottish people and Europeans too. The families become very inclusive. So it's nice. Yeah. And I've learned a lot about what I don't know
Yeah.
about all that. A lot. It's been very humbling and very beautiful too. Yeah.
Thank you so
Well,
much,
thank you so
Jennifer.
much. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we had the same impulse. I was just feeling a lot of gratitude just now for all that you've shared today, and I can really feel it working in my system already. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful summing up and reflecting back. And I hope we took enough time for that. I felt kind of excited to share all this stuff somehow. So, but I
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much for being here with us, Anna. It's definitely great one to have this available for people to just listen to in the background, but also the thorough introduction also to what this is all about and the blueprint and your perspective of it all. And
Yeah.
Mm,
I appreciate hearing that again, and but also hearing the whole history of how that came to unfold for you or emerge for you.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
evolving our world, our work really
Mm,
comes to understanding all the things that you have woven together, the Peter Levine's work and Ray Castellino and PPN, somatic experiencing, trauma resolution, polarity, energy work, osteopathy, and then your own, diamond hearts and to a very understandable uh, method, as well as a relationship with
mm.
the everlasting parts of us that are accessible through.
Thanks. I wanted to mention Franklin in there too. He was in that summary. He was a major influence. I'm so grateful, so grateful. He just gave me a career, really, cranial, teaching cranial, and then all the other things that fit into. And yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to tell the story a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I put in the show notes where people can find you there in Boulder at the Colorado School of Energy Studies, and know that you have now exciting projects, healing projects coming. The new combination of of the cranial work and polarity and blueprint resonance. So all will be available to people. So,
All right.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, everybody.
Mhm.